The air trembled with the weight of war as fire rained from the sky. The city of Thalvra shook under the sound of alien war drums. Smoke coiled from shattered towers while the screams of the fallen echoed in the wind. Deep in the central arena, the people were forced to watch another battle for their survival. She knelt in the dust, her chest rising and falling as she struggled to stay conscious. Her name was Alari, one of the last free daughters of the Vena species. Blue-skinned, silver-eyed, marked by glowing patterns that once stood for royalty. Now she was just a prize for the victor. Her enemy stood before her, tall as two men, wrapped in obsidian armor that shimmered with pulsing heat. The champion of the Dravkur, his blade rested by his side, but every step he took forward pressed terror deeper into her spine. Around them, thousands of warriors cheered for her end. Alari had fought with honor. She had faced his blade with bare hands and speed. But she was no match for brute strength and cruel science. Her arm was broken. Her breath came sharp. She had no more to give. Still, she raised her chin and stared up at him. "I will not beg," she whispered. It was the last bit of pride she had. The Dravkur champion didn't respond. He simply raised his sword and pointed it down at her. Above the arena, floating warships cast long shadows over the sands. The Dravkur had claimed another world. And yet, far beyond the clouds, a message had been heard. The humans, neutral till now, had watched. And something in them shifted when they saw the Vena fall. No one noticed the figure that moved along the arena edge, a human. Lean and fast, wrapped in scavenged armor. Dust on his boots. A bow on his back, not a hero. Just someone who had seen. Enough. He didn't wait for permission. He knocked the arrow, aimed, and leapt from the shadows. Alari heard the hiss of air. She thought it was her last breath. Then she saw it. A glowing arrow slicing past her head. It cut the silence in two. In the blink of a heartbeat, the Dravkur champion stopped moving. The arrow was buried in the base of his throat. He fell. Without a word. The blade dropped from his hand and clanged onto the ground beside her. The sound was louder than the war drums. Silence swept the crowd. The giant was dead. Alari looked up, confused. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. A figure landed beside her, crouching low. Human, young, dirty, eyes sharp with purpose. He didn't speak. He simply raised his bow again and turned toward the nearest guards who had drawn their weapons. The people didn't cheer. They didn't move. None had ever seen the Dravkur defeated in single combat. And yet the proof lay bleeding at Alari's feet. She realized then she wasn't alone. Not anymore. Her enemy had fallen. But her war had just begun. Asterisk. The moment froze in the minds of every soul watching. The Dravkur champion, unbeaten across galaxies, now lay still on the dust-stained floor. His armor hissed as its systems failed, and sparks danced around his throat. The crowd remained silent. Some too shocked to speak, others too afraid. Alari was still kneeling. Her heart raced, but her body had yet to catch up with the moment. Her vision flickered between the dead champion and the stranger beside her. She didn't know if this was real or the last dream before death. But the warmth of the human's presence felt real. The human's name was Kalen. He didn't share his name. Not yet. He stood up slowly, another arrow already drawn. The string of his bow pulled tight, aimed at the gathering soldiers at the far end of the arena. His eyes never blinked. His hands didn't shake. Dravkur warriors were trained not to hesitate, but none dared to charge. Their champion had fallen to a single arrow, from a human. From a race they believed to be passive, quiet, weak. That illusion had shattered like glass under a boot. Alari tried to stand but staggered. Kalen caught her arm. His grip was strong, but not cruel. She saw no metal on him, no markings. No flag, just quiet resolve and a bow with a quiver half empty. He didn't come with an army. He came alone, she whispered, Why would a human help me? He didn't answer with words. He gently pulled her behind him and stepped forward, putting himself between her and the Dravkur. The crowd began to move, slowly, nervously. The Vena prisoners, caged around the arena, rose to their feet. Some had tears in their eyes. Others held the bars, knuckles white with hope they had long forgotten. They had witnessed something impossible. From the high tower above the arena, General Vaker watched with a clenched jaw. His fists trembled on the railing. He had ordered this execution as a message. He wanted fear. He got silence. He wanted obedience. He got defiance. He turned to his commanders and barked orders. Kill the human. Kill the girl. Burn the entire pit if you must. His voice rang like thunder, but the hesitation in his officers was clear. None wished to face a bow that killed the champion without effort. Kalen knew they wouldn't hesitate long. He bent his knees slightly, eyes scanning the arena floor. He counted escape paths. One narrow corridor behind the throne gate. 2 high ledges with ropes. 1 small tunnel near the animal pens. All risky. But risk was better than surrender. "Ilari," he said calmly. "Can you run?" She blinked. Her legs burned. Her arm ached. But something inside her surged to life. Maybe it was the fire of survival. Or maybe it was the presence of someone who had chosen to fight when others turned away. "Yes," she said, standing on shaking legs. "Then follow me," he said as he let his arrow fly. The arrow struck the control panel on the gate. Sparks burst and the mechanism whined before unlocking. The arena gates swung open with a heavy groan as panic rippled through the crowd. Dravkur soldiers shouted orders. Weapons were drawn. But Kalen was already moving. He ran straight into the chaos. Ilari followed close, her bare feet pounding on the cracked stone floor. The screams returned, but this time they weren't from terror alone. They were joined by cries of rebellion. Vena prisoners grabbed broken chains and hurled stones at the guards. The arena became a storm of confusion. Fires roared higher. And as Kalen turned to shield Ilari from a blast, she realized something terrifying and beautiful. The humans weren't what the galaxy thought they were. They weren't observers. They were warnings. Flames danced in the arena as smoke curled toward the darkened sky. Ilari ran with every breath she could gather. Her body screamed, but her will refused to stop. Beside her, Kalen moved like wind, silent and swift. Each footstep was measured. Each glance behind him was sharp. Dravkur guards shouted as they chased. Their boots thundered against the stone. Blasters hummed to life. Energy bolts hissed through the smoke, but the crowd in panic slowed them. Screams, falling bodies, and rising rebellion turned the order of the arena into pure confusion. Kalen slid behind a collapsed pillar and motioned for Ilari to crouch. She dropped beside him, heart pounding in her ears. Her breath came quick. She touched her shoulder and felt wetness. Blood, but not deep. She was still alive. And she was still moving. They waited a second longer. A squad of soldiers sprinted past, unaware of their position. Kalen reached into his belt and pulled out a thin disc. With a flick, the hologram burst from it, showing a crude layout of the arena's lower levels. He pointed toward a narrow line on the edge. "There," he said. "Maintenance corridor. Leads to the outer wall." Ilari nodded. Her body shook, but her mind was awake. Awake in a way she hadn't felt in months. Not since the first bombardment. Not since the cages. Not since the war began and the galaxy watched her people fall. They rose again and dashed between broken statues and fallen warriors. Every shadow could be a threat. Every flicker could be death. Yet Kalen didn't hesitate. Not even once. She noticed something strange about him. He wasn't just brave. He was prepared. They reached a sealed door near the far wall. Kalen pulled a rod from his back, slammed it into the access slot, and twisted. Sparks flew. The door groaned and then opened halfway before jamming. Ilari didn't wait. She slid through the gap without thinking. Inside, the air was cooler. The sounds of the arena faded behind thick walls. Pipes ran along the ceiling. Dim. Lights flickered above. It was narrow, damp, and tight, but it was safe. For now. Kalen followed and sealed the door behind them with a snap of his device. They walked in silence for a few minutes. The tension clung to them like sweat. Ilari finally spoke. "You didn't come here for me." "No," Kalen said. "I came to send a message." "To the Dravker?" she asked. "To everyone watching," he replied. She didn't answer. Her legs moved on their own now. Somewhere in the shadows they passed an old banner of her people, torn and forgotten. She stopped to touch it. Her fingers brushed over the faded symbol. It once stood for unity. Now it hung in silence. "Why us?" she asked. "Why did the galaxy look away?" Kalen didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was cold. Because they were afraid to lose what little peace they had. "You were the cost of their silence." The words stung. But they weren't wrong. The Vena had called for help. None came, except one. She followed him deeper into the tunnel. The lights changed to red. The path sloped upward. Then, a sharp bend led them to a grated platform above the outer wall. Below was a vehicle bay. Dravker. Speeders, patrol ships, and stolen gear were stacked like trophies. Kellen pointed. "We're stealing one." Ilari raised an eyebrow. "You know how to fly that?" "I know how to crash it in the right direction," he said with a straight face. She didn't laugh, but a small breath escaped her lips. Something like the shadow of a smile. And for the first time, she didn't feel like prey. She felt like something dangerous was waking inside her. Ilari crouched near the edge of the grated platform and stared down at the vehicles below. Dravker guards moved in organized patterns, unaware that two fugitives were watching them from above. The patrols were tight. The ships were locked. But one corner near the far end was dimly lit and lightly guarded. Kalen studied their formation, lips pressed into a thin line. His hand rested on the hilt of a compact blade strapped to his chest. Ilari could see him counting steps, scanning shadows, and measuring the timing of each guard's movement. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He simply observed. Finally, he turned to her. "When I jump, count to 3 and follow. Stay low, don't stop. We take the small flyer near the exit ramp." Ilari nodded. Her palms were damp with sweat. She had flown in ships before, but never while running for her life. She didn't ask what would happen if they got caught. She already knew. Kalen jumped first. He landed behind a stack of crates with a silent roll. No alarm, no shout. Ilari took one breath, then followed. Her body hit the ground hard, but she stayed low. Her shoulder throbbed from the earlier hit, but she didn't slow. She didn't hesitate. The guards didn't see them, not yet. Kalen moved fast, knifing through the open space like a shadow. Ilari stayed close, ducking behind crates, barrels, and cargo racks. Every inch of her skin burned with alertness. Every breath felt too loud. But she kept moving. They reached the ship, a small, sleek craft built for scouting. Its surface was scratched, marked with battle symbols. Kalen opened the hatch with a stolen codecip. The door hissed open. They both jumped inside and sealed it behind them before the sound caught attention. Inside, the cockpit was tight. Lights blinked in unknown languages. Kalen dropped into the pilot's seat. Ilari slid into the gunner's chair. Her fingers hovered above unfamiliar controls. He didn't ask if she could shoot. She didn't ask if he could fly. They didn't have time for doubt. A shout rang out across the bay. One of the guards had spotted movement. Seconds later, alarms blared through the chamber. Red lights began to flash. Footsteps thundered toward them. Blasters charged with rising whines. But Kalen had already started the ignition. The engine roared to life. The scout ship lifted, hovering a few feet above the ground. Alari grabbed the side rail and held on. Then she looked through the rear screen and saw a full squad of Drav Corps running toward them with weapons raised. She shouted, "There! Coming!" Kalen gritted his teeth and slammed the throttle forward. The ship lurched, then bolted toward the closing gate at the far end of the bay. The guards fired. Blasts struck the hull. Sparks flew across the panels. A warning flashed on. The dashboard. Ilari ignored it. The gate was halfway down. Too low. Kalen didn't slow. He pressed a switch and flipped the ship sideways. The wings tilted as the craft slid under the barrier just before it sealed with a crash behind them. They shot out into the night sky. City lights sparkled below. The stars shone above. And for the first time in weeks, Ilari felt wind through. A broken hatch and the taste of free air. She leaned back, eyes closed for a second, and felt something strange in her chest. It wasn't fear. It was something that had almost died inside her during the war. Hope. Kalen didn't speak. His eyes were on the stars, fingers tight on the controls. They had escaped the pit. But this wasn't over. Not even close. Behind them, Dravkur ships began to rise from their towers in pursuit. The stars stretched wide around them as the scout ships soared through the clouds. Ilari gripped the metal bar beside her seat, breathing fast as the wind howled through the cracked side panel. Kalen flew with quiet precision, his eyes locked. On the horizon while red lights blinked above, behind them, the roar of Dravkur engines filled the night. Multiple ships gave chase, their silhouettes sharp against the moons. Their weapons glowed. Their scanners locked on. But Kalen kept pushing forward, twisting through mountain ridges and canyon walls with impossible speed. Ilari spotted one of the enemy ships closing in on their left flank. It fired. The beam missed, but not by much. It lit the sky like lightning and shook their craft. Kalen pulled hard on the controls, diving into a narrow ravine as stone walls rushed past on either side. "Where are we going?" Ilari shouted over the roar. "Somewhere they can't follow." Kalen replied without turning. The chase turned into a blur of speed and risk. Lasers flashed. Rocks shattered. One of the Dravkur ships clipped a ridge and exploded in flame. The others swerved, but they were closing the distance. Ilari stared at the controls. She didn't know their language, but she understood pressure. She slammed her hand on a panel marked in red. A burst of countermeasures exploded from the back of their ship, scattering heat flares and chaff. For a moment, the enemy ships lost their lock. Kalen took the opening and flew straight into a hidden cave system carved into the cliffs. The sudden darkness swallowed them. The engines echoed through the tunnel walls. Kalen slowed the ship just enough to dodge the tight bends. Glowing fungus and ancient markings lined the stone as they slipped deeper into the earth. Behind them, the cave mouth flashed bright. The enemy had found the trail. Ilari turned and saw lights flooding into the tunnels. "They followed us," she said, voice tight. "I hoped they would." Kalen answered. He pulled a lever and ejected a beacon behind them. It bounced once and latched to the wall. A blue light pulsed once, then vanished. Seconds later, the cave shook as a controlled blast collapsed the entrance, sealing off their trail. Dust filled the cabin. Rocks fell. But the tunnel ahead stayed clear. Kalen pushed forward until they emerged into a vast underground chamber. Ancient and abandoned. The cavern stretched for miles. Old ruins glowed with faint energy. Strange machines lined the walls, half buried in the stone. Ilari looked around in awe. "What is this place?" "Before the war, this was a research site," Kalen said. "Vivena once built here. Your people studied deep energy lines beneath the surface." Her throat tightened. "I thought this place was lost." "Most thought it was," he said. "That's why we're here." He landed the ship near a broken tower at the edge of the chamber. The engines cooled with a low hum. Silence returned, heavy and ancient. Alari stepped out first, her boots sinking into the soft soil as the lights from the ruins danced across. Her skin, there was power here. She could feel it in her bones. The walls pulsed with memory. Her ancestors had walked this path long ago. She reached out and touched a symbol carved into a pillar. It lit up at her touch and sent a wave of warmth. Through her hand, Kalen watched her. "You're connected to this place," he said. She nodded slowly. "My grandmother told stories of this city. Said the old spirits still whispered here." "Then maybe they'll speak again," he said. Far above, the sealed cave rumbled faintly. But the enemy was no longer their greatest threat. What lay in? The ruins might change everything. Alari walked through the ruins in silence. The air felt ancient, like it had not been touched in years. Moss grew along the walls, glowing softly under the dim lights that lined the arches. Her fingers traced each etched symbol, waking them one by one. Kalen followed a few steps behind, watching everything with quiet alertness. His boots crunched softly on the stone, but he made no effort to hide his presence. Here, in this place buried beneath war and time, they were not hunted prey. Not yet. "Why did you know about this place?" Alari asked without turning. Kalen paused. "We gather knowledge. Earth listens, even when it does nothing. Some of us store what others forget." She nodded and kept walking. The corridor opened into a chamber shaped like a dome. At the center was a raised platform, surrounded by ancient devices humming with weak power. Above it, a large crystal pulsed. Slowly, like a heartbeat, Alari stepped forward and placed her hand against the base of the platform. The crystal responded. A soft chime echoed through the room. The lights grew brighter. The machine stirred. And from within the crystal, a projection emerged, casting soft light across the chamber. It showed her world, spinning gently in space. Then it zoomed out, revealing the borders of Vena territory as they once were. The colors dimmed as the map faded into red. One by one, the territories fell. The borders collapsed, until only a small corner remained. Tears welled in her eyes. She knew what it was showing. The fall of her people. The price of being forgotten. Kalen stepped beside her and stared at the projection. This place was built to protect the last hope of the Vena. They planned for defeat. They prepared for memory. What does it protect? She asked quietly. He pointed toward a console to the right. Something under the surface. Something buried deep and sealed by code. Only a true descendant can open it. Alari looked at him with sudden awareness. "You knew I would be able to." "I hoped you would be," he answered. She walked toward the console and placed her palm on it. The screen flickered. Lines of language Vena script flowed across it. Her heartbeat quickened. The ground beneath them trembled. Lights burst across the room. Then the floor split open in a wide circle, revealing a spiral stair descending into darkness. Without a word, Alari stepped forward. Kalen followed. Each step downward was lit by the walls themselves, glowing faintly as they passed. The deeper they went, the quieter it became, until finally they reached a vast underground vault. At its center was a single object, a sarcophagus carved from obsidian and crystal, suspended in a field of energy. Symbols danced across its surface. Some were warnings, others were prayers. "What is this?" Alari whispered. Kalen took a moment before replying. "The last sentinel of the Vena, a guardian built from both machine and spirit. It was never deployed, hidden when the council refused to act. Meant to protect your people should no one else come." She stepped closer, eyes wide. "Is it still alive?" "Not in the way we understand," he said. "But it will awaken to a voice it knows." Alari looked down at the sarcophagus. Her reflection shimmered on its surface. A war burned above. Her people suffered. But now, something ancient waited for her command. She placed her hand on it and whispered in her native tongue, a name only blood could carry. The field around the tomb cracked. The crystal hummed. And something began to stir inside. Above them, the Dravko regrouped. Their ships circled the canyon mouth. Their scanners searched, and they had not given up the hunt. But something was about to rise that had not walked the galaxy in generations. The vault trembled as ancient energy surged through the room. Sparks leapt across the sarcophagus while its surface cracked in glowing lines. Alari stepped back, shielding her eyes from the light. The hum in the air turned into a low pulse that echoed in her chest. Callan raised his weapon instinctively. Not out of fear, but readiness. He had seen power awaken before. But this was different. This felt sacred. Like something forgotten by time had just taken its first breath again. The lid of the sarcophagus split open down the middle. A hiss of gas escaped. Steam poured into the chamber. Then the figure inside began to rise. Not with jerky motion, but with smooth grace. Like it had always been waiting. A tall armored shape stood within. Not fully machine, not fully organic. The metal was fused with living tissue, pulsing beneath layers of transparent plates. Its eyes opened slowly, glowing like the heart of a star. It looked directly at Alari. She couldn't speak. The language she knew felt too small for this moment. Her people had built this protector in secret, poured their last strength into it. And now it stood because she had called it. The sentinel moved forward and knelt before her. Its voice was deep and layered, echoing with ancient tones. "Blood of Vena, do you seek justice or mercy?" Ilari swallowed and answered, "Justice. For my people, for every child caged, for every voice silenced." The sentinel stood again and nodded slowly. Its chest lit with lines of energy. A beacon activated in its core, sending a pulse through the stone beneath them. Far above, Dravkor scanners blinked in alarm. A signal rose from the depths, ancient, Vena-made, and powerful. They moved quickly, unaware of what they were about to face. Troops descended from ships. Orders were shouted. The hunt resumed. Callan tapped his earpiece and picked up movement. "We've got incoming. Heavy units. They'll break through the upper ruins within minutes." The sentinel turned toward the vault's wall and raised its arm. Light surged. From its palm, a hidden door opened, revealing a chamber filled with weapons, armor, and strange machines covered in dust. "These tools were left for the return," the sentinel said. "Choose what fits you. The battle does not wait." Callan stepped inside without hesitation. He grabbed a reinforced combat vest and slung an energy rifle across his back. Then he turned to Alari and offered her a blade crafted from glowing crystal. She took it. The weight felt right, not too heavy, not too light. It hummed with energy as if it recognized her touch. She strapped a bandolier across her chest and nodded at the sentinel. The trio moved together through a rising tunnel that connected the vault to the surface. As they climbed, the walls shifted. Lights flickered. Ancient voices whispered through the stones. Not words, just feelings. Pain, strength, hope. They emerged on a ridge overlooking the ruins. Dravkor troops swarmed the edge of the cliff. Drop ships hovered nearby. Spotlights scanned the ground. But they didn't see what waited in the shadows. Ilari looked at Callan. "Are you ready?" He smiled slightly. "Always." The sentinel stepped forward and raised both arms. A wave of energy exploded from its body, frying sensors, disabling weapons, and dropping soldiers to their knees. Chaos erupted instantly as panic spread through enemy ranks. Callan fired first. Alari followed. Her blade danced like lightning. She moved with a speed she didn't know she had. The sentinel moved like a god of war, breaking armor with a single strike. In minutes, The ridge became a battlefield lit by fire and fury. The hunters had become the hunted, and the galaxy would soon learn that the Vena were not finished. The battlefield roared with fire and metal. Dravkor soldiers scattered as energy blasts ripped through their formations. The Sentinel marched through them with relentless power. Its arms pulsed with ancient tech. Every movement tore through their strongest lines. Ilari spun through the chaos, her crystal blade slicing through enemy armor. Her body moved with precision, but her heart was fire. She no longer fought for survival. She fought for vengeance. For her people. For those whose voices were stolen. Kalen moved alongside her, never far, never behind. His shots were sharp and final. Every enemy that raised a weapon fell before they could aim. He covered her without hesitation. Not because she needed saving. Because he had chosen to stand with her. The enemy forces pushed harder. More dropships landed across the ridge. Mechs unfolded and charged forward, weapons glowing. But the Vena ruins responded. Stone walls lit up with symbols. Energy shields burst from the ground. The city had awakened. The Sentinel roared and slammed its fists into the earth. A wave of force cracked the cliff edge and sent entire squads into the abyss. Ilari stood at its side, defiant. Wind blew through her hair. Blood streaked her skin. But her eyes held no fear. One of the Dravkor commanders shouted in order. A missile launched into the sky and curved toward the vault's entrance. If it hit, the last hope of the Vena would be buried forever. Ilari saw it too late. But Kalen was already moving. He sprinted toward the ridge, grabbed a pulse detonator, and leapt onto a nearby rock. With a single throw, the device locked onto the missile and exploded mid-air in a flash of white and heat. He landed hard, rolled, and grunted in pain. Ilari rushed to him, but he waved her off. Still standing, he muttered with a tight grin. The Sentinel turned its head and spoke. "The portal is open. We must finish it now." Ilari looked past the chaos and saw it. A swirling gateway had opened at the heart of the ruins. It pulsed with gold and violet light. A connection to the forgotten places where the Vena once built. Their greatest defenses. If they reached it, they could awaken more Sentinels. But the Dravkor knew too. A final wave of their best warriors charged forward. Huge, armored, brutal, no fear, no mercy. The ground shook with their steps. They would do anything to keep that gate closed. Ilari stepped in front of the portal, her blade lit bright. Kalen stood to her right, rifle raised, wounded but ready. The Sentinel planted its feet and raised its arms again. The last stand began. The battle was brutal, close, flames and screams filled the air. Blades clashed, bodies fell. The portal pulsed brighter with each second. One by one, the enemies fell. But Kalen took another hit to the side. He dropped too. One knee, breathing hard, Ilari turned, eyes burning. She screamed and drove her blade through the last enemy between her and the gate. The battlefield went still. The wind returned. And in the quiet, the gate surged with a final burst of light. She stepped through first. The Sentinel followed. Kalen hesitated, then smiled and limped in behind them. The portal closed behind them and vanished into stone. The ruins quieted, the cliff smoked. But in the silence, the stars above blinked to life again, somewhere deep in space. Other hidden vaults began to glow. Silent sentinels stirred. Ancient systems awakened. The Vena were rising again, not as victims, but as warriors, and beside them stood a human with a bow and a reason. The war had changed, so had the galaxy.